Depositing my parents' inheritance should have been the easiest thing I did all week. Instead, it escalated into a public accusation, a fight for my freedom, and the most humiliating day of my life. The check felt heavy in my hand, not because of the paper, but because of the weight of what it represented. It was the final, tangible piece of my parents' legacy, $357,000. The proceeds from the sale of the house I grew up in. Every scuffed baseboard, every pencil mark on the doorframe measuring my height, every memory soaked into the walls. All of it had been liquidated into this single slip of paper. It was a somber, bittersweet moment. This money was meant to be the foundation for my own future, a down payment on a new home, the start of my own family story. All I had to do was deposit it. The bank was a grand old building with marble floors and impossibly high ceilings, the kind of place designed to make you feel small and your money feel important. I'd been a customer at this branch for over a decade. I knew the tellers by name, or at least by sight. I straightened my blazer, smoothed down my dress, and took my place in line, rehearsing the simple transaction in my head. "Hi, I'd like to deposit this check into my savings account." Simple, straightforward, nothing to worry about. When it was my turn, I approached a young teller, a woman with bright pink hair named Chloe, who I'd seen a few times. I smiled warmly. "Hi, Chloe, how are you today?" She offered a polite, professional smile back. "I'm well, thank you. How can I help you?" I slid the check and my debit card across the counter. "I'd just like to deposit this into my savings account, please." Chloe's eyes widened as she looked at the amount. Her smile tightened. "Oh, okay. Wow. One moment." She typed a few things into her computer, her brow furrowed. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by a nervous tension. She looked from her screen to the check and then to me. Her gaze lingered for a fraction of a second too long. "Is there a problem?" I asked, keeping my voice even. No, not a problem," she said quickly. "It's just, for a deposit of this size, I need to get my manager's approval, standard procedure." I nodded. That made sense. It was a lot of money. "Of course, I understand." She disappeared into a back office, and a few moments later, a man in a crisp but slightly too tight gray suit emerged. He was maybe in his late 40s, with thinning hair combed meticulously over a bald spot, and a self-important air that seemed to enter the room before he did. He had the check in his hand, holding it by the very edge as if it were contaminated. This was Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. I'd never had to deal with him before. He didn't come to the counter. Instead, he gestured for me to come to his glass-walled office off to the side. "Ma'am, could you step in here for a moment, please?" His tone was like scraping a fork on a plate. I felt a prickle of annoyance, but I kept my composure. I gathered my purse and walked into his office, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. The soundproofing was immediate, sealing us in a bubble of uncomfortable silence. He sat behind his large mahogany desk and gestured for me to take the chair opposite him. He didn't make eye contact. He just stared at the check. "This is a very substantial amount," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes, it is," I said. "It's from the sale of my parents' home. They both passed away last year." I offered the information to smooth the way, to give context, to make this easier. He finally looked at me. His eyes, a watery blue, scanned me up and down, from my sensible heels to my professionally styled braids. It wasn't a look of assessment, it was a look of disbelief, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces just didn't fit in his mind. "And where did you say you got this?" he asked, as if I hadn't just told him. My patience began to fray. "From the sale of my house, my family home. The closing was yesterday. The title company issued the check." "I see," he said, though his expression clearly said he didn't. He tapped the check on his desk. "We have to be very careful with instruments of this size. Fraud is rampant these days." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. I had anticipated a hold being placed on the funds. I had not anticipated an interrogation. But I was prepared. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. I slid it across the desk. "Here," I said, my voice tight. "This is the final closing statement from the sale, signed by myself and the buyers. There's a copy of the deed, a letter from my real estate attorney confirming the transaction, and contact information for both the law firm and the title company if you'd like to verify." I pushed it closer to him. He didn't even glance at the folder. He pushed it back towards me with 2 fingers. "That's all very well and good, but anyone can print papers off a computer." I stared at him, my mouth slightly agape. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his comment left me breathless. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't due diligence. This was something else. Something ugly. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice dangerously low, "I have been a customer at this bank for 11 years. My credit score is over 800. I have never overdrawn my account. I have just provided you with a mountain of legal documentation to verify the legitimacy of this check, which you have refused to even look at. What exactly is the problem here?" He leaned back in his chair, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. It was the look of a man who held all the power and knew it. "The problem, ma'am, is that I am not comfortable with this transaction. The check seems suspicious. The whole story seems suspicious." "What about my story is suspicious?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to control it. "That a black woman can sell a house? That a black woman can be in possession of a 6-figure check?" His smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of cold indignation. "Now, let's not make this about race," he said, his voice sharp. "This is about bank security." He stood up, a clear dismissal. "I'm sorry, but I will not be accepting this deposit today. In fact, I believe this situation warrants further investigation." My blood ran cold. "Further investigation? What are you talking about? It's a certified check from a title company." He ignored me, turning his back to pick up the phone on his desk. He held my check in his other hand, looking at it as he dialed. He wasn't calling the title company. He wasn't calling the law firm whose number was sitting right in front of him. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized who he was calling. He spoke into the receiver, his voice calm and authoritative, as if he were merely ordering office supplies. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a potential fraud in progress at the downtown branch of Capital Trust Bank. There's a woman here. She's trying to deposit a fraudulent check for a very large sum of money. Yes, she's here right now. She's becoming very agitated." He turned and looked directly at me, a flicker of triumph in his watery blue eyes. "Please send a unit right away." The click of the receiver being placed back in its cradle was the loudest sound I had ever heard. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Me, standing there in a state of stunned disbelief. Mr. Henderson watching me with that grotesque little smirk, as if he'd just checkmated me in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The sounds of the bank outside his glass office, the quiet hum of computers, the distant stamp of a teller's machine seemed a million miles away. My mind was a whirlwind of fury and fear. He had called the police on me for trying to deposit my own money, my inheritance. Through the glass, I could see the other customers staring. Some tried to be subtle, others were openly gawking. Chloe, the teller with the pink hair, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine horror. This wasn't just an accusation. It was a public spectacle. He was parading my humiliation for everyone to see. The heat in my neck bloomed into a raging fire. But I forced it down. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry or scream. I would not become the agitated woman he was painting me as. I squared my shoulders and met his gaze with a look as cold and hard as the marble on the floor. Two police officers walked through the main doors a few minutes later. They were a study in contrasts. One was older, maybe late 50s, with a weary face and a frame that strained the buttons on his uniform. The other was younger, fitter, with a sharp, alert expression and a hand that never strayed far from his belt. Henderson strode out of his office to meet them, gesturing back at me as if presenting a prize catch. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, his voice oozing a sickly sweet tone of civic duty. "This woman," he pointed a stubby finger at me, "is attempting to pass a fraudulent check. When I questioned the legitimacy of it, she became quite hostile." The younger officer, whose name tag read Davis, turned his sharp eyes on me. "Ma'am, is this true?" I took a slow, deliberate breath before walking out of the office to face them. "No, officer, it is not. My name is Alani Freeman. I am attempting to deposit a certified check from a legitimate real estate transaction. Mr. Henderson here has decided without any evidence that it is fraudulent." I gestured to the folder still sitting on his desk. I have provided him with the signed closing statements, a letter from my attorney, and contact information for the title company. He has refused to look at any of it. He has refused to make a single phone call to verify. The older officer, Miller, looked at Henderson. "Sir, did you attempt to verify the check?" Henderson scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "It's obviously fake. Look at the amount. Look at her." He didn't have to say the words. A woman like her shouldn't have money like this. "It's not my job to chase down her accomplices on the phone. It's my job to protect this bank from fraud." Officer Miller walked past Henderson into the office and picked up my folder. He began to leaf through the pages, his expression unreadable. Officer Davis, however, kept his focus entirely on me. "Ma'am, why don't you tell us your side of the story?" he said, his tone professional but laced with suspicion. "There aren't two sides to this story, officer," I said, my voice unwavering. "My parents passed away. I sold their house. This check is the proceeds. It is my inheritance. It is my money. The only story here is the one this man has invented in his head because he is unwilling to see a black woman as a legitimate high-value customer." "That is a baseless and slanderous accusation," Henderson sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "This is about procedure." "Then follow it," I shot back, my voice finally cracking with the sheer injustice of it all. "Call the title company. The number is right there. Call the law firm." Officer Davis took a step forward. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. You're causing a scene." And there it was. I was being managed. My righteous anger was being reframed as hysterics. My demand for basic respect was being treated as a disturbance. I saw the trap closing around me. Henderson, the respectable bank manager, versus me, the agitated black woman. I knew how this story was likely to end. "Look," Davis said, his voice softening slightly, becoming almost paternalistic. "Let's just clear this up. Why don't you come with us down to the station? We can get it all sorted out quietly." I felt a chill go down my spine. "No," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "I am not going anywhere. I am the victim here. I will not be treated like a criminal." Henderson seized the opening. "See, she's refusing to cooperate. I told you, she's probably got a record." I looked at the faces around me. Henderson's triumphant sneer. Davis's hardening resolve. Miller's weary resignation. I realized in that moment that I could not win this fight by their rules. So, I had to change the game. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and took out my phone. "Oh, here we go," Henderson sneered. "Calling your lawyer? A bit late for that, don't you think?" I ignored him completely. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing a number I knew by heart. I pressed the speakerphone button, and the crisp, electronic rings echoed in the sudden silence of the bank. The officers and Henderson watched me, a mixture of curiosity and annoyance on their faces. It rang twice. Then a man's voice, deep and resonant with authority, answered, "Richard Sterling." I held the phone up, my eyes locked on Mr. Henderson. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by a core of pure steel. "Richard, it's Alani Washington," I said, my voice calm and crystal clear. "I'm sorry to bother you at work. I'm down at the Capital Trust branch on Main Street. There seems to be a misunderstanding with the branch manager regarding the deposit for the foundation." I paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing. "Yes, the one we discussed last week. He seems to believe my check is fraudulent and has involved the police. I was hoping you could help clear things up. I know you sit on the board with their CEO, David Hampton. Perhaps you two could have a quick chat." The silence that followed was absolute. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the entire bank was Richard Sterling's name, echoing slightly from my phone speaker. Mr. Henderson's smug mask didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. The blotchy red of his anger drained away, leaving a pasty, sickly white. His watery blue eyes, which had been filled with such arrogant certainty, were now wide with dawning, catastrophic horror. He stared at me, then at the phone, as if I had just summoned a demon in his office. Officer Davis's posture changed instantly. The aggressive, forward-leaning stance softened. His hand moved away from his belt. He looked from me to Henderson, his sharp eyes suddenly filled with confusion and a flicker of fear. He was a man who understood power dynamics, and the ones in this room had just undergone a seismic shift. On the phone, Richard's voice was calm, but with an undercurrent of cold fury. "Alani, are you all right? Are the officers giving you any trouble?" "I'm fine, Richard. They're here, Richard," I said, my gaze never leaving Henderson's terrified face. "But the manager, a Mr. Henderson, is refusing to deposit the check and accused me of fraud." "Give me the phone," Officer Miller, the older one, said quietly. He took a step forward, his hand out. His weary expression was gone, replaced by one of grim purpose. I handed it to him. "This is Officer Miller with the City Police Department," he said into the phone. "Who am I speaking with?" "You're speaking with Richard Sterling, a board member of the Freeman Washington Foundation. More to the point, you're speaking with David Hampton's personal attorney and a member of the Capital Trust Bank's Ethics Oversight Committee. Now, officer, is my client, Miss Washington, being detained?" Henderson made a small, strangled sound in the back of his throat. Ethics Oversight Committee. The word seemed to physically strike him. "No, sir," Officer Miller said quickly. "She is not being detained. We are simply mediating a dispute." "There is no dispute," Richard's voice cut back, sharp as glass. "There is a bank manager who has racially profiled a valued customer, and in doing so has jeopardized a significant donation to a charitable foundation that the CEO of this bank, Mr. Hampton, personally championed. I am calling David on his private line as we speak. I expect this situation to be rectified in the next 5 minutes. In the meantime, officer, ensure that Miss Washington is not inconvenienced in any further way. Is that understood?" "Understood, sir," Miller said. He handed the phone back to me. "My apologies for the misunderstanding, Miss Washington." I took the phone and ended the call. The silence returned.
But this time it was heavy with Henderson's ruin. He looked like a man who had just watched his own obituary scroll across a screen. Officer Davis was now actively avoiding my gaze, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Miss Washington," stammered, the name foreign and painful on his tongue. I don't understand. Your bank account is under the name Alani Freeman." I finally allowed myself a small, cold smile. Freeman was my maiden name, Mr. Henderson. It was my parents' name. The house, and therefore the deed and the check, were in that name. My legal name, the name my husband and I use for our philanthropic work, is Washington. If you had bothered to do a second of actual due diligence, you might have noted the F.W. in the F.W. Freeman Washington Foundation name and put two and two together. But you didn't, did you? You took one look at my face and decided you had the whole story. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. That check, the one you're holding like it's a piece of trash, is the initial seed donation for a citywide scholarship program for underprivileged youth. A program your CEO, David Hampton, attended the launch gala for last month. There was even a picture of him with my husband and I in the business section of the paper. Henderson's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked down at the check in his hand as if it were a burning coal. The public humiliation, the career-ending mistake, it was all crashing down on him at once. Then the phone on his desk began to ring. It wasn't a gentle chime. It was a shrill, insistent shriek, the kind reserved for internal priority calls. He stared at it, his hand trembling. The small display on the phone was visible from where I stood. It read, "David Hampton." He looked at the ringing phone, then at me. His eyes were pleading now. He was begging me, silently, to make this stop, to rewind time, to let him off the hook. I took a step closer to his desk, my voice dropping so that only he and the officers could hear me. "You wanted to call the police on a black woman? You wanted to make a scene? You wanted to exercise your power because you thought I had none?"
The phone kept ringing, a relentless countdown to the end of his professional life. "You're worried about your job right now, Mr. Henderson. That's what I see in your eyes. You're worried about being fired." I leaned in a little closer. "You should be worried about so much more than that. I'm not just depositing this check today. I'm going to make a withdrawal. I am going to withdraw every ounce of professional credibility you have. This story, with your name and your picture, will be on every local news site before the end of the day. My husband's PR team is very, very good. By tomorrow, every bank in this state will know the name John Henderson. They will know you as the man who tried to have a board member's wife arrested for being black in his bank." I stood up straight, my purse in my hand, my dignity fully restored. "Getting fired is a temporary inconvenience, Mr. Henderson. I'm going to make you permanently unemployable. I'm going to make you a cautionary tale." The phone screamed its fourth ring. "Go on," I said, my voice utterly devoid of emotion. "Answer it. Your boss is calling." With a hand that shook so violently he could barely press the button, Henderson finally answered the phone. He didn't even manage a hello. He just held the receiver to his ear, his face the color of ash. He didn't speak, he just listened. I watched as every last vestige of his authority, every shred of his self-importance, dissolved under the unheard fury coming through the line. His shoulders slumped, his head bowed. When he finally hung up the phone, the click was one of finality. It was the sound of a guillotine blade falling. He looked at me, his eyes hollow.
"Miss Washington," he whispered, his voice raspy. I, I am so sorry. There are no words. It was an error in judgment. A terrible, terrible error." "An error in judgment?" I repeated, my voice like ice. "No, Mr. Henderson. An error in judgment is when you order the wrong flavor of coffee. What you did was an act of pure, unadulterated bigotry. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see a criminal instead of a customer. You chose to see a threat instead of an opportunity. You chose humiliation instead of verification. This wasn't an error. This was your character on full display." The two police officers were now actively trying to blend into the scenery. Officer Davis was staring intently at his shoes, while Officer Miller was quietly speaking into his radio, likely giving a situation resolved, no crime committed update. That was a monumental understatement. I turned to them. "And you too," I said, my voice firm. "You were ready to take me to a station, ready to treat me like a suspect, based on this man's lies, without a single shred of evidence. You didn't protect or serve me today. You participated in my harassment. I will be filing a formal complaint against this branch, and it will include a full account of your conduct." Miller had the decency to look ashamed. Davis just grunted and turned away, heading for the door. They left without another word, leaving Henderson and I in the wreckage of his career. The other customers, who had been watching the drama unfold, quickly averted their gazes and pretended to be engrossed in their banking slips. The show was over. Henderson, seemingly on autopilot, stumbled over to the teller station. He took the check from his desk, along with my debit card. His hands were still trembling as he processed the transaction. The entire process was silent, punctuated only by the clicks of the keyboard and the whir of the check scanner. Chloe, the teller with the pink hair, watched him with wide, fearful eyes, keeping her distance as if he were radioactive. He handed me the receipt. $357,000 deposited into my account. A simple transaction that had nearly cost me my liberty. I took the receipt and my card, but I wasn't finished. "One more thing, Mr. Henderson. I would be closing all of my accounts with Capital Trust Bank, and I mean all of them. My personal accounts, my husband's business accounts, the Freeman Washington Foundation's endowment account, all of it. We have a little over $9 million with your institution. By the end of business tomorrow, that will be zero." He swayed on his feet, looking as if he might faint. $9 million. It was a catastrophic loss for a branch manager, a failure so profound it was almost comical. It was the final nail in a coffin he had built for himself. "I will also be informing Mr. Hampton that the foundation will no longer be partnering with Capital Trust on any future charitable endeavors," I continued, twisting the knife. "Your actions today haven't just cost you your job, they have cost this company millions in assets and a valuable community partnership. You see, this is what happens when you underestimate people." I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there, a ghost in a gray suit. As I walked across the marble floor toward the exit, I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, but they were different now. They were filled with awe, respect, and for some, perhaps a little fear. I hadn't raised my voice to a scream. I hadn't thrown things. I hadn't become the hysterical caricature he tried to make me. I had calmly and methodically dismantled a man's life with his own prejudice, using nothing but the truth and the power he never imagined I had. The next day, as promised, my husband's PR team released a carefully worded statement to the press. It didn't mention my name, but it detailed an unacceptable incident of racial profiling at the Capital Trust Main branch involving the wife of a prominent philanthropist.
The story was picked up immediately. By noon, Capital Trust Bank was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. That afternoon, the bank issued a public apology. It announced that John Henderson was no longer employed by the company and that the entire branch staff would be undergoing mandatory, intensive anti-bias training. A week later, Richard Sterling called me. "Just thought you'd like to know," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Henderson is toxic. I've had a few friends in HR at other banks call me. His resume is making the rounds, but nobody will touch him. He's been unofficially blacklisted." I felt a quiet, somber sense of justice. It wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. It was about ensuring that the next Alani Freeman who walked into a bank with her inheritance, her dreams, her legacy in her hand, would be treated with the dignity and respect she deserved. My parents' memory wasn't just in that check. It was in the strength they gave me to stand up for myself, to fight back against injustice, not with rage, but with relentless, undeniable competence. I had deposited my parents' legacy, and in the process, I had secured my own.